Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you had a wonderful first day and morning session with the Volunteer Engagement Roundtable. Today's session is Attracting and Engaging Volunteer Passion from the Quest. So I would love to introduce Barry. He's with Head, Heart, and Hands Engagement Collective. He's located in Central Florida. And a quick fact is Barry is on the board for the National Alliance for Volunteer Engagement. So I'm going to turn it over to Barry.
Audrey, thank you so much. And what an honor it is to spend an hour with all of you in learning, and just really excited to be able to explore this topic. It is so critical to you and your role as a leader in volunteer engagement. So I just want to give you a little shout out to begin with. First of all, by saying, because of where we all are in our world right now, one of the things that I really miss is getting on airplanes because I've not been able to travel as I had been for a number of years in the past. And every time that I have been on a plane for the last stretch of years, every time I hear those pre-flight announcements from a flight attendant, specifically when they talk about the oxygen mask, I always get this smirk on my face. It's a bit of a reminder to me and a reminder to all of you as 21st century leaders of volunteer engagement, how important it is that we take care of ourselves before we venture to take care of others. So I just want to applaud you right now for what you've been doing for the last 2 days now. You're investing in yourself, and it's one of the greatest ways that you can practice self-care is by making sure that you are investing in your own development. So a quote out of my own writing is, "Those who require our help will best receive it only after we have taken care of ourselves." And one of the greatest ways to do that, my opinion, and I've been going through a bit of an internal metamorphosis, an awakening, if you will, at my ripe age of 54. This is actually not a meme or not a Googled picture, but this is actually a photo of my own bookshelf to let you know how much of a reading nerd I am, especially when it comes to leadership books. And I believe in it. And I've been doing some more reading in recent months, especially in the face of our social justice challenges that we've been facing in our nation. And the bottom line that where I've landed, and it's important for us to think about this and to acknowledge it as we talk about how do we attract and engage volunteer passion from the outset in our organizations, is that we should be in the mode right now of questioning everything that we do within our organizations. So that could be your organization's culture. It could be the structure, the hierarchical structure that most of us serve within, our processes, the loyalties that individuals have to each other, the relationships that we build, and even our steps that we take to attract and engage volunteers. We should be in this mode right now of questioning everything. As a low to moderate income family, a white family growing up in rural Pennsylvania, I was indoctrinated into one way of thinking, and now 50 years after that, I am discovering some things and having to wrestle with it all that I've believed my entire life that I'm finding are just not true. And I'm really challenging my own implicit bias. And I would challenge you to do the same as we talk about this topic, including as we really talk about questioning everything. It's the use of these terms, management and leadership, as though they're somehow interchangeable terms. I challenge that, and I encourage you to challenge it as well, because this is the way this guy defines the difference. When I think about management, managing our volunteers, I think about the 4 lowercase p's of policy and procedure and process and practice. And those are important, but they're different than leadership. And leadership is that one capital P. It's a focus on people. Now, I love in a live workshop environment to ask which of these two is more important. And ultimately, somebody in the room will land on their equal importance. But yet, let's be honest with ourselves. In your organization, in your practice, in the way that you've been developing in your role, which one of them gets more attention? And I believe that the honest answer is the management side, because it's a bit more black and white, and it's a bit more rote, if you will. Whereas that leadership thing, dealing with the capital P of people, it's fuzzy, it's difficult, it's challenging, and therefore some opt to not give it their full focus. And I'm going to challenge you during our time together to give it your full focus and really think about what it means to be a leader in the 21st century. Not in that traditional way, the George Washington, sort of courageous, charismatic leader. It's often what we think about when we think about leadership, but instead, I love this image. To me, this speaks to your role as a leader of volunteer engagement. So just touching on a few points to lay a foundation for our learning together, because I do believe that when we start to flip the model for leadership and we start thinking about what does it look like in the 21st century, how do we become more enlightened as leaders, that we get away from this notion that we earn our leadership role, and instead we begin to embrace, and I'm hoping that you open your mind and consider that maybe we should be called to lead. Maybe there's something that tugs in your heart that says, hey, I want to be in a role where I can support others and I can help them to get connected with doing something that's meaningful in their community and bring greater fulfillment into their lives. And when I talk about being called to lead, that's what I'm talking about. It's not about just filling holes and making sure that all of the roles for volunteers are filled within our organization, but it's something bigger. It's bigger than that. So as we talk about your important role, give it some thought. Have you been called? Have you been called to lead in your leader of volunteer engagement role? So I know that you've seen these. You're likely familiar with our 8 volunteer management practices as defined by through the Volunteer Generation Fund. And today, for our time together, we're going to focus on numbers 3 and 4. So that's recruiting and marketing to prospective volunteers. Although that first word, recruiting, we're going to talk about that word just a bit more in a bit. And number 4, interviewing and screening and selecting volunteers. That will be our focus. I do have a variation on those 8, and I refer to it as the volunteer life cycle. And it really only has 5 points on it, and we're going to focus on the first 2 of those 5. So attraction and discovery, which then leads to engagement and sustainment. And then eventually it's redirection for every one of our volunteers. We honor however long they choose to serve, whether it's brief or whether it's years, it could be decades, but redirection eventually comes for all of our volunteers. And we embrace that as part of the overall volunteer life cycle. So as we lay this foundation for our conversation today, I would love to, as much as we're able to during our time together, to make this a conversation. So I encourage you, should you have a question, should you have a thought, something that you want to add to the conversation, a deeper insight that will help others to learn, please enter that in the chat or the Q&A box that is available to you. And our moderators for a session, they're going to be reading those out loud. I've given them carte blanche to interrupt me at any time during our session. So I do encourage you to add comments, to add questions, and they will pop in via voice, and we'll be able to have, albeit a somewhat distant, conversation during our time together today. So as we proceed and we talk about attraction and discovery, we cannot talk about those 2 important phases of the volunteer life cycle until we first define this concept of motivation. And support team, this is where we're going to go to our first breakout session, because I challenge all of our participants by suggesting that there are only two types of motivation. So your task as a group will be to explore what are those two types, and then go a little bit deeper and define what those two types are. How do you differentiate between those two different types of motivation? So give me a verbal, team, if we're ready to launch our breakout sessions.
Yes, we are.
Fantastic.
So what we'll be doing is we'll be doing something slightly different if you are in a breakout room yesterday. So today what we're going to do is I'm going to drop a link right here into the chat for a Zoom session. What you'll need to do is copy and paste it or click it if your computer allows, and it will open you up into a Zoom. Once you're in there, we'll push you into a breakout room so you can discuss what Barry is going to ask you to discuss.
Yes. So only two types of motivation. What are they? And work together as a team to define them.
Okay. So what you'll do is please make sure that you are clicking on the link that I've posted here in the chat. And once you head into Zoom, you can move into a breakout room. And then if you're having any issues, please feel free to put it into the chat and I can help assist you. And then in probably just a few minutes, we will be silent so there's no feedback.
So we should be coming back right now. So Barry, go take it away.
Fantastic, and welcome back. And it's my hope that you had an enriching conversation with your peers. Here has been my experience, and I have had the blessing of posing this same question in front of hundreds of gatherings, thousands of leaders of volunteer engagement, just like yourself. And here's been my experience as I have done so, is that percentage. Some of you were likely able to land on these two words of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation as being the only two types of motivation that exist. Some of you may have used the words internal and external, which are also absolutely acceptable. The challenge, the rub comes in, and I love to do this because I sense that learning is happening in the moment. I then, after our peer leaders are able to identify those two words, I say, okay, define the difference between them. And it's likely that a percentage, maybe a smaller percentage of you, were able to really clearly delineate the difference and to articulate it well. So if you'll allow me to share my perspective on only two types of motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, here I go. So intrinsic motivation is it's all of this stuff that stirs inside each of our hearts, our unique individual hearts. It's like a complex cocktail of needs and wants and desires and passions and skills and experiences and all of these things that make us uniquely who we are. It's all of those things together that compel us to do everything that we do every single day. That is our intrinsic motivation. It's the stuff that stirs inside of us that gets us to do what we choose to do every day. In contrast to that, extrinsic motivation is an effort that's applied outside of us, typically by somebody else, to get us to do what they would like us to do. And that's the difference, is intrinsic motivation compels us to do what we want to do, whereas extrinsic motivation is an effort by somebody else to get us to do what they would like to do. And I challenge all of you to think about your role as a leader of volunteer engagement, especially when we talk about attracting and engaging our volunteers in our communities. Which one of these two is more important? And it's my hope that we agree that intrinsic motivation is really where it's at. And as I began writing a number of years ago, there was something tugging in my heart, my intrinsic motivation to put together words that hopefully would provide guidance to leaders of volunteer engagement just like you. And I was challenged. I was challenged by some pretty high level executives in nonprofit organizations on this really simple concept that we as leaders of volunteer engagement should place the individual needs of a volunteer ahead of our organization's needs. And that is antithetical to likely what you have learned or what you have heard or believed about your role, because we tend to be so mission driven. And I don't disparage that. I believe in being mission driven. At the same time, the way the equation works, because of the way that we're uniquely designed as human beings, is that when we really tap into the individual needs and wants and desires, those intrinsic drivers of our volunteers, when we cater to those first, and we get them aligned with doing something that's meaningful to them, and then get out of their way and let them do amazing work in their community, that's when the real magic begins to happen in our volunteer supported organization. So planting that seed, I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about this concept of attraction. And you're going to notice that I do not use the word recruitment. I instead use the word attraction. And here's the reason why. I am a damaged soul. And I'm a damaged soul because I spent 15 years of my professional career before my nonprofit life under the umbrella of human resources. Now, I wasn't a hiring and firing guy, but I was in the learning and development space and organizational development, and that is my expertise. But I sat next to the recruiters in the HR office of the organizations where I served. And candidly, I was a little sickened by what I would hear, but I knew it was just part of the game. So as you see in this image right here, that a recruiter, what their job is to fill a hole. And that's what a recruiter does. And it's very transactional in nature from a recruitment perspective. Whereas I challenge us to think above recruitment to something that's a bit more holistic, a bit more strategic, and a bit more people-centered. And that is much like a dating situation, a relationship building scenario, where we think about what does it take to attract the right fit talent to be able to serve alongside of our organizations and our mission, and be able to capture their heart in a meaningful way. It's more than just filling a hole, but it's really about going straight to those intrinsic drivers, to what's happening in here. So let's take a closer look at the difference at a deeper level between recruitment and attraction, because I see this a lot in nonprofit organizations and volunteer supported organizations, that recruitment tends to be episodic, meaning that we only go out and recruit people when we have a need to recruit people. Whereas attraction is a perpetual state of always scanning our environment, checking out the landscape to see who is out there who may be able to achieve a deeper level of fulfillment because they are able to serve through your mission alongside your organization and be able to meet those needs and wants and desires that they have burning within them. So it's a different way of thinking about it. Recruitment is also transactional in nature, whereas attraction is transformative. It's more than just filling a hole. It's being able to facilitate a person connecting with doing something that feeds their passion and also makes an impact in your community. That's transformative. And right now we're all immersed in our election process, and it's democracy in action. Well, your role as a leader of volunteer engagement is democracy in action every day. So again, it's transformative in nature, and you need to begin to think more about how your role of attracting volunteers to your organization is transformative. And it's not just about you fulfilling your organization's needs or posing the relationship as though the volunteer is there to fill your organization's needs, but instead think about how you and your organization and your mission can help to fulfill the volunteers' needs. Because when you get them at that level and you hook them and their passions are all in, you're going to see an even deeper level of service to communities. So let's just talk a bit, some transactional stuff, some logistical stuff about how you do that. So when we think about attractive messaging to engage our volunteers from the outset, you think about the who, what, when, where, why, and how, and you see it in gold font on your screen right here. As you come up with volunteer role descriptions, they really should be focused on having the volunteer in mind. A little bit less so on meeting your organization's needs, and a little bit more so on how do we fulfill those stirring passions that are inside the hearts of your volunteers. So, of course, you want to have role details, but you also want to include what are the desired outcomes and the impact of a volunteer role. Help that person to begin to see the significance, the importance of this role, and the outcomes, the impact that they will generate as they serve in this capacity. Also include the logistics of location and time. I think that a lot of people want to know as they choose to serve in their communities whether they're going to be serving as an individual or as a team or a group. So include that in your role descriptions. How much client contact, whomever your organization serves. It could be a senior in your community. It could be part of the homeless population. I certainly have a few years of a homeless outreach ministry background, so I'm very in tune with that. And I knew that many of our volunteers wanted to know, will I be working directly with those who are homeless in our community? Some absolutely wanted to. Some were a little bit more hesitant in doing so and wanted to do perform a more behind the scenes role. And we honor all of that and include it in the volunteer role description. Age requirements, time commitments, a call to action, all of these are really important. And I want to add another thought. And if your role descriptions do not have this, then what you may want to do, and maybe it's in your marketing messaging that you embed this as well, you want to include a sentence that the type of person who enjoys X, and you think about, try to project what those ideal passion sets might be that the volunteer has stirring within them that would make them a good fit, the right fit for performing in that volunteer role. And then I'm going to add one more to your list as you come up with all your volunteer role descriptions, that what you should be including is a catch-all. In other words, if you don't see a role on this list that appeals to you, reach out to us, reach out to the organization, reach out to you, the volunteer leader, and have a conversation. You want to encourage your community members, your future volunteers, to feel emboldened, to have that conversation with you so that they can pitch a role that possibly doesn't even exist for your organization right now, but could have impact. And I want you to think about that. So all of what you create should be designed to speak to the heart of the potential volunteer. So as you craft attractive messaging for engaging your future volunteers, make sure that the messages are not focused so much on your organization, but a little bit more so on the individual volunteer. Speak to them as a person that you know has unique intrinsic motivators stirring within them. And even though our role descriptions and our marketing messages can be an opportunity to introduce new words and terms that are specific to what your organization or your mission seeks to accomplish, make sure that all of your marketing is jargon light or maybe even jargon free. You want to speak in a language that that potential volunteer in your community will understand. So as you assess your marketing messages and your role descriptions, make sure that the lay person, somebody who's not already engaged through your organization, is going to understand what that shop talk, what your specific lexicon, your language that you use within your organization. We all have it. Every organization has it. Every focus within our community, we all have our own jargon, and we want to make sure that we're trying to minimize that so as not to scare off somebody who doesn't know the language yet. And I reinforce that we must emphasize impact and outcomes in all of our communication, is help that person connect what stirs in their heart to what they will do that will bring them fulfillment and meaning into their lives as they serve alongside of your organization. And I hope that I don't step on a toe, but if I do, that means that you are in the process of questioning everything, which I hope you are right now. If you have ever pushed out a message that says, we need volunteers, I'm going to challenge you to do more and to do better. Because one, I always cringe a little bit when I see this message, and I see it a lot. I see it a lot through our faith-based organizations who are seeking those to serve alongside of their mission and possibly serve others or serve their community. And one, it always reeks of desperation a little bit. It's not the most attractive of messages of we need volunteers. I would suggest that if you're in that perpetual state of attraction, that you likely have a bench already built. And so we want to safeguard that impression, even if it's not an accurate impression, that there's desperation on our part. And I also question the we part. So be very sensitive whenever you're crafting messaging about how you use pronouns. And I want you to have, maybe it's somebody who has an eye, an editor's eye or a writer's eye to read your writing work. And it could be your marketing messages, it could be your role descriptions, to look for the use of pronouns. We, us, they, those are often the ones that we see in our writing. And we, in a novice sort of way, we naively will include those pronouns, not realizing that what we're doing is we're creating an us versus them mindset. Whereas I suggest that as weird as it may feel to speak about your organization and your team of volunteers in the third person in your writing voice, that I encourage you to do that. So don't speak about we, speak about your organization. Because what you want is you want your community to feel a sense of ownership to your organization and its mission. And when we use the word we, even though when we do that, we're talking about us and trying to feel inclusive and express a collective nature. It has the potential to make others feel excluded. So think about how you can position in your writing voice, speaking about your organization in the third term. As weird as it may feel, it actually is a more effective way of writing in your marketing messages. So that is attraction. And again, support team, if you have any questions pop in, I am always open to entertaining them. So feel free to jump in. Look, I stopped.
Yeah, we do. We have someone who said, thank you for covering this topic. They view it as like the change from just personnel to human resources.
You know what? I would go one step further than that, because as a person, and again, I'm in this phase of my life where I am questioning everything. I've never been in love with the term human resources, and here's the reason why is because when was the last time that you referred to a group of people as human resources? That term it really is a 1970s term that came out of trying to fix the impersonal feel that the word personnel feel, but how we landed on human resources within our corporate life, I have no idea. I actually worked for an organization, and even though this organization, in my opinion, was not the perfect example of how to treat people with dignity and respect, at least they got this word or this term correct. They referred to their HR department as people services. And I thought that was brilliant. I loved it. I wish they lived it out, but at least they were using words that I felt were more resonant of what the real function is, which is serving people. So that's my take on that. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, and Rosemary says she always tells a new potential volunteer that they should volunteer to make their heart happy. And if they aren't the place for that, then that is fine.
And it's not only fine, but if you have the bandwidth and you have the heart to do this as a leader of volunteer engagement, I would not end the conversation there. I would instead dip into what I call discovery. And what a great segue to be able to find out, well, what would help that person to find fulfillment, even if it's not through your organization, because maybe in your connection in your community, and I always encourage you to get actively involved in your community, so you are getting to know your peer community of nonprofit leaders and volunteer supported organizations in your community, because if it's not through you, we have to be comfortable with that, but maybe we could go one step further. And we can send that person back out into the community as an ambassador for your organization, because you took the extra time to help them get connected with another organization or another mission that could be better aligned with what stirs in their heart. Yeah, what a crazy idea that you would actually be in the attraction and discovery mode for other volunteer supported organizations in your community. So love the questions, love the comments. And if you'll allow me, I'm going to keep pressing forward, because I want to talk about this second phase of the volunteer life cycle, specifically discovery. And this is a simple model. Let's not get too lost in the framework. I want to break this down really easy for us. The time and talent matrix. So as any matrix, we have an x-axis. In this case, the x-axis from the left refers to little or no skills required for a role, whereas on the right, it would be some pretty considerable skills or specific criteria that are required for the role. In the y-axis, the north and south axis, the bottom would be little or no potential for that individual to continue to serve alongside your mission for sustained service, whereas the top of that y-axis would be considerable potential. There is a wide open door for them to be able to connect at a level. And what I've done then is I've identified just some simple guidance. These are not ironclad rules. This is not a hard and fast guide, but just something to think about as you consider how much time and how much effort and what exactly do I do given the nature of the roles and the way that they're defined within your organization. Because all organizations who leverage volunteer talent, we're different. So if quadrant one, meaning that there's really little to no potential, that they'll continue to serve and there's not a lot of skills required, that what we want to do is, whenever possible, offer that volunteer a choice. So we have 3 different roles in this process. Who would like to do A? Who would like to do B? Who would like to do C? So that choice will help to increase that volunteer's engagement in that moment. Whereas quadrant 2, meaning not a lot of opportunity for sustained service, but yet we do need some skills. We need some competencies in this person that you would want to get into the screening process. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. Whereas in 3, quadrant 3, where not a lot of skills, but yet considerable potential. You want to fully engage in discovery, and I'm going to talk more about discovery in just a moment. And then we can see that quadrant 4 is the elevated version of quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. So lots of skills required, lots of potential opportunity for continued service, and we want to dig in deeply with that individual. So the discovery process, truth be told, I spent a number of years as part of my volunteer life in leadership roles in my professional association. And this was 10 to 15 years ago. And as I did, I watched a specific interaction, an instance, a moment go horribly bad over and over and over again. And that observation is what inspired this guide for me to be able to put together a simple step-by-step process that encourages a leader who's typically doing the right thing because their head's always on a swivel and they're looking for opportunities to demonstrate their leadership presence and to interact with others. So that's the seek and the touch. And then as they begin a conversation, they'll tune in and maybe they get a whiff, they get this hint that the person could be interested in getting more involved in some way to volunteer alongside this organization and its mission. And maybe these touch points, these conversations don't happen for you in exactly this context, but the important part is what's coming next. And where I want you to place your focus in this guide for engaging volunteers is right here, because this is where most leaders miss the mark. You're involved in a conversation. It could be a formal interview. It could be just a chat at a cocktail party or an event. The moment that we get a sense that somebody might be interested in serving through our organization, we tend to pounce and we drop into what I call tell and sell mode, which basically means, well, let me tell you about all the wonderful things that you're going to receive because you choose to volunteer through or alongside our organization. It's so common for us to do this. We tell and we sell. And instead, what I challenge you to do is flip the conversation. That's the moment where you do something other than what you may have learned to do or what you're more prone to doing, which is dropping into tell and sell mode. And instead, flip the conversation and become more skilled at asking open-ended questions that begin to open up the heart of that individual. They begin to share what are their intrinsic motivators. What are the things that stir within them that compel them to do what they do? What's important to them? What are their needs, their wants, their passions, their desires? And then as they share, you listen. You listen and you learn from them. And maybe you discover that it's through your organization that you can help them to meet those needs. Or maybe it's not. And that's got to be okay as well. But I listen intently to leaders. I listen in conference environments. I listen in meetings. I listen in interviews with people. I listen when I watch and listen to talk shows and podcasts. And here's my assumption, or here's the results of my analysis. And harsh statement coming. Most of us are not good at crafting open-ended questions. Most of us have not developed the art and the skill, the science of developing and asking open-ended questions that cannot be answered with a yes or no, that encourage that person to open up and to share more of what's in their heart. But yet, I would boldly suggest that it is the number one tool in your leadership toolkit, is how to ask a brilliantly crafted, open-ended question so you can shut up. You can stop talking and you can just listen, and you get to learn about the heart of that individual. So something for us to think about, something for us to build upon as we continue to grow our skill set. Asking open-ended questions. If we were in a live environment and we had a third or a half of a day, you and I would be investing in huge skill building right now on how do you write and how do you just whip up an open-ended question right off the cuff. How do we do it? It's not something that comes naturally to most of us, and that's okay. You can build the skill. So I challenge you as a leader right now, as you're questioning everything, that is something you should be questioning within yourself, is how good am I really at asking open-ended questions? And if the answer is I got some room to grow, then work on it. Work on it. So as we look again at the time and talent matrix, I said that quadrant 4 is a high level of engagement, and it's one that I'm going to offer a few thoughts, because I know that we tend to, in this profession, we get immersed on what's called skills-based volunteering, and I believe that there's another session that's been offered for this event. And again, not to disparage, but to really challenge you in your quest to question everything. Let's think about how we use that term, skills-based, because when we think about skills is a learned ability to generate a desired result. It really only speaks to one component of our total self. So a lot of my work is focused on head, heart, and hands, because if we add the spiritual self, then all of that together creates the whole self. But yet skills only speak to what we can do with our hands, literally with our hands, or sometimes figuratively with our hands, our skills. Whereas when we begin to look at competencies are knowledge and skills that are applied, and we add the heart component to a competency as well. So now we begin to look at more of the whole self when we elevate from skills-based views to a competency-based views. But yet we have not hit the nirvana yet, because I would suggest that as a leader of volunteer engagement, competencies only speak to what we have already done in our past. It's our knowledge and our skills that we've already applied. But what about our capabilities? What about the capabilities of every potential volunteer who could be serving alongside your organization and its mission? That is where I encourage you to focus, because capabilities are transferable knowledge and skills. In other words, maybe this person's not ever performed that skill in the past, but they have done similar things. And through the process of you asking the right kind of questions and allowing them to tell stories of their past experiences, you can begin to envision that they do have the head, heart, and hands, and they're ready to be able to serve in a new capacity, because they have the capability, even if they don't have the skill or competency already intact. And how you get there is by something called behavior-based interviewing. We're not going to have enough time to be able to dig into this in the level that it deserves, but behavior-based interviewing, you should be writing it down, and you should be Google searching this concept after our session, or after our conference today, our conference experience. Behavior-based interviewing, and even though you may have never heard of it, I bet that nearly every one of you has answered a question like this: tell me about a time when. And then the when would continue with a description of something that is ideally aligned with a competency that's desired for the organization or desired for the role. And behavior-based interviewing rests upon this really simple notion. It's a really simple notion that the best predictor of the future performance of a volunteer, a capability-based volunteer, goes above a skill-based volunteer. The best predictor of the future performance of a volunteer is blank performance. And hopefully you have some things noodling in your brain right now about how you would fill in that missing word in the sentence. The star that appears on our screen is a hint as well. So if you said the best predictor of future performance is past performance, you would be correct. And it's a really simple concept, but it's also a little bit limiting. So I'm challenging us as we think about skills, competencies, and capabilities, that maybe it's not just what this what this person has performed in the past, but it's what they've done in the past that gives you a hint that they may have the capability to serve in a new way through your organization. So when we get to that quadrant 4 and we're really digging in, I do strongly endorse behavior-based interviewing. It's a skill. It's a process that we go through, and it begins by identifying what are the desired competencies or capabilities for a volunteer role, and what are they for your organization as well. You must begin in the gray box by defining what they are. And then you must invest in the effort to craft interview questions that help to draw those desired competencies or capabilities out of an individual. And as they begin to tell their story, what you would be looking for is a story that follows the STAR format for their response. They explain the situation, they set it up, then they talk about the task that they performed in their past. They tell you what they did, their action, and then what happened as a result of that action. And when we're sharing that full story, you begin to visualize their capability. And again, we could spend a half day or a full day building skill on behavior-based interviewing. But as a leader, I'm challenging you. If this is not in your wheelhouse already, if it's not part of your repertoire, it should be. It should be, because if you really are seeking more quadrant 4, where you need specific capabilities and competencies within a volunteer, and you're hoping that you can achieve sustained or continued service, that this is an investment worth it. So behavior-based interviewing, and then when you get those insights as the volunteer, potential volunteer shares that STAR response, then you get to connect them with connect that right fit talent to the right volunteer role that not only feeds their passion, but also serves your mission in a meaningful way. Now, if you're anywhere near my age, you probably know who this guy is. And if you have no idea who this is, that probably means that either you were not raised in the United States, or you're nowhere near my age. But I'll tell you that in my younger years, this guy's face was all over our television screen. He's Ron Popeil. He is an inventor extraordinaire, but he's also a pretty brilliant pitch guy. So his face was on TV a lot. And he had a lot of catchphrases back in the day that he would use to market his products. And one of them was "set it and forget it." So you probably heard that before. And I think of that phrase because sometimes that's what we do after we get a volunteer serving through our organization. We talk about attraction and we talk about discovery, but then what follows that on the volunteer life cycle is engagement. And engagement, we dare not take the set it and forget it approach. But instead, what we need to do is constantly tap into what's going on in the heart of our volunteers, recognizing that it evolves over time. And the number one skill for you for meaningful leadership in your organization is relationship building. And it happens through coaching. Coaching is a really simple concept that means that you just dedicate time to sit down and have meaningful conversations, structured, meaningful conversations, focused on performance, focused on development with your key volunteers who are in that quadrant 4 level, who you may have invested behavior-based interviewing techniques and gotten them into the right fit role, but just checking in on occasion and having coaching conversations helps to ensure that you are questioning everything that you do, especially when it comes to traditional management or even traditional leadership practices, and instead thinking about how do I become an enlightened 21st century leader who cares for not only my individual volunteers, but cares for my community by caring for those individual volunteers. And somewhere along the way, I also deeply support my organization's mission by caring for those individual volunteers and placing their needs and wants and desires, their intrinsic motivators, first at the top of the list. So Audrey, I'll stop. I see we have about 5 minutes left. What other questions have come in from our peers?
A couple of comments that did come in was from Irene. She said to talk to volunteers about past volunteer successes and why they felt it was successful for them. And then,
yes, yes, yes. That is brilliant. And when we craft that in an open-ended way, that is a beautiful question to ask. Great suggestion.
and then Jennifer also noted to also for them to explain lesson learned from past behaviors.
Yeah, so it sounds like we have from our participants, those who have chimed in, that they're thinking about what those questions might be. So whether you're in the simple act of discovery, that's part of what I was referring to as the guide for engaging volunteers when you're flipping the conversation, think about those open-ended questions that allows you to talk less as the leader and listen more. And as you listen more, you learn more and you get the tips, you get the insights that helps you to get those individuals aligned with doing something meaningful. Good. What else? What else, Audrey?
At the moment, that is all I see.
Love to hear that already our teams have been thinking about how they craft those questions. Again, if we had hours to dive into a workshop environment, I'd be challenging all of you to build that skill in the moment. How do you write an open-ended question? Could be an interview question. It could be one that you just throw into a conversation to learn more about the person, the potential volunteer that you would hope to serve and include in your mission achievement. So open-ended questions, it is the magic sauce. It is the number one skill that I would challenge you to build in your leadership life. So one more thing that I love to do, it looks like we have 11:12 by our current time, our East Coast time. Have just a few minutes left. I would encourage you, if you have a device nearby, if you've got a research device, notice it's not a phone, it's a research device in this moment. I would encourage you to Google Donald Kirkpatrick. And I love to focus on this as we end our time together because Donald Kirkpatrick, way back in the 1950s, this is a model that's been around for decades and it still holds true today as a reminder to all of you and what you're really supposed to do with not only the learning you've gained in this session, but the learning that you're gaining throughout your entire virtual conference experience. Do more than just complete that evaluation that I am confident that the team from Volunteer Florida is going to be sending to you. Do more than that. That feedback that you provide to them is important to them, but don't let your work end right there. Because Donald Kirkpatrick says that that's level 1 of the 4 levels of learning evaluation. What you want to do to go to the next level is to think about what you've learned. What did I actually learn? What did I gather in this last hour? What have I gathered over my 2 to 3 day experience? Note all of those. Go back and revisit your notes and start capturing all of these key learning moments that you've had. And then as you do that, you begin to challenge yourself to go to the 3rd level. Is what can I do? And who do I need to support me as I take what I've learned and attempt to apply it, to change my behavior, to do something different in my leadership life, to be able to grow as a leader by taking what I've learned, not just reacting to it, but deeply embracing the learning and applying it. And then you have this beautiful opportunity to measure what results you have achieved based upon applying what you have learned. So when we look at Donald Kirkpatrick's model, it's a pretty simple model, but yet it's profound. It's profound in the way that it challenges us to do more than just knee-jerk react to, oh, I like this, I didn't like it, that guy ruffled my feathers, that guy challenged me to question everything, and guess what I did? I started to question everything. And good if you have, but go beyond that reaction. Think about what you learned. Think about what you can apply, what you've learned, and what results you may attain. Because the truth bomb is, Engagement in your organization, engagement in your mission, engagement in your community, it happens one person at a time. It's a truth, it's an undeniable truth. And with that, I turn it back to my peers.
All right. Thank you so much, Barry. I always enjoy sitting in on your sessions. You have been a friend of Volunteer Florida and National Service for quite a few years now. So happy that you're able to present to a wider audience. So this wraps up the 10:15 to 11:15 session. Please make sure to complete your survey. It can be found in the event tab on the attendee portal. There's a 15-minute break, and then the next session will begin at 11:30 a.m. So thank you, everybody.